approval of the January 11th, 2021 minutes.
I have a copy of them if anybody wants to look at them. We revised them and sent them around just this afternoon. And I really do pledge to try to get the other minutes. The other minutes are in draft form, but I'll be circulating those this week. And those are going to be the minutes for the January 25th meeting, January 28th meeting. And I have drafts of those here in case we need to refer to them.
And so there's no changes since the last draft was circulated in the January 11th, 2021 meeting.
Not since 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Any comments, questions, or discussion on the minutes?
I move adoption.
Second?
So I suggest we defer approval of the January 25th and the January 28th minutes.
All in favor of adopting the...
Mr. Chairman, if I could
I'm sorry.
add, if we could note for the record that all members are now present, so that it's reflected in the vote.
All in favor of adopting the January 11th, 2021 minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Alright, back to, we started the discussion of Article 5 of the state charter last meeting. Guess we'll pick back up there.
Mr. Chairman, I don't recall what we discussed on Article 5, but just for completeness sake, I think the minutes are reflected, but the only two that I saw there where we've had a request in public comment to review them is section 5-04 and 5-08, which is one of the requests of the mayor. So I just asked that we get that on that list of ones to simply look at. Or to look at, not to simply look at.
Sounds good.
I don't have any other ones outside of those.
Any committee members on Article 5? Public? You have any public? Are you the public?
I have a public comment. I know, I'm shocked. I feel like we're all talking to you, and you're not here tonight. My comment would be that you may want to compare this whole section, especially the budget preparation and adoption and the budget document, to the Louisiana State Budget Act. And the reason I suggest that is because there may be things in here that either might be kind of conflicting with that. That's the state law that we're required to follow. That's what the auditors look at, consistently. It has more steps in here, and so you may not need all those steps. That's not what I'm suggesting, that you just adopt that wholeheartedly, but that you might want to compare the two and maybe perhaps make sure this is still the skeleton bones that you need for that act to happen, but that it's not in conflict with state law.
Have you run into any conflicts that you'd like to bring our attention to specifically?
I think there is some sections, especially in section 5-03, with the part 2 and part 3 that, well, necessarily part 2, I would say, that may be more detailed than what is required to be there. And quite frankly, some parts that may be confusing compared to what is required in the Budget Act, especially, for instance, like number 5, a statistical comparison of the administrative versus service costs. I'm not really sure what qualifies, to be quite honest, as administrative costs versus service costs in many of our department budgets. Some other things here. Number 6 may be kind of difficult because the budget starts as the mayor's proposed budget, and then the council has input in that. Now, of course, we have lots of meetings prior to that where the council has input, but there's not an official input on that until after the proposed budget comes under discussion. So that may also be,
But now, to be clear, the document that 5-03 is talking about is the executive budget, the initial proposed budget before any action is taken.
that's my understanding.
So
now, that could...
My question would be then, I would assume that number 6 under part 2, such other information as may be requested by the council, is if the council made a request of the mayor, normally his budget comes out pretty soon, right
Right.
now, right?
Great,
Said, would you also address these issues?
yes,
And you would have that, outside of that, I
yes,
don't know what that means, right?
right.
Okay.
Right. There are specific requirements in the Budget Act, and there's actually a specific format that's required by that, that's on the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's website, and then I can also provide you the document for all of that. So we just might wanna check on that overall. The other thing I would suggest is that parts, 4, 5, and 6, in some ways, under part 2, really more, I guess, section 4, maybe read this entire section and see how it fits with bonded debt. Because again, there are sections of our charter that seem to authorize bonded debt, or that authorize debt of some type. And that bonded debt section has been interpreted by some people to mean no debt of any type unless you do X, Y, and Z. So read this kind of in concert with that to see where those conflicts may lay and how we can clear that up.
That was the initial request of the mayor's office, right?
Yes.
Comparing 5-04 to 5-08.
Correct.
And did you, I don't remember off the cuff, in terms of making it functional is the right word, but easier to function, I guess, with, in handling debt, did y'all have any thresholds or anything? 'Cause I know that we had talked, or maybe, somebody, I feel like, I don't think it was the administration, but somebody brought up the possibility of doing some kind of thresholds, like up to this point, that point. In
Right.
terms of, is there anything that y'all, I mean, we're in front of city, like, is there anything that, guidance or suggestions or requests, whatever you wanna call them, to help in terms of what would make it easier to operate?
I can research some of that, but as for giving you a hard and fast number right now, I'm not prepared to do that.
No, that's fine, but help
Right,
with that, because
right.
again, you're the one that's gonna be there in the day-to-day trying to deal with it.
So part of what's confusing for me is like in section 5-05, under, emergency appropriations, which is section B, it talks about that the council may be able to do this to the extent that there are no available unappropriated revenues to meet such appropriations. The council can basically do an emergency ordinance to borrow money. I don't know if that applies with the rest of what the charter states. And so those are kind of some of the sections that seem to be in conflict with one another, unless they all give you better than on me. But those are some that I think we're gonna need to look at with a close eye.
In terms of the stuff that's here, is there any, like, for instance, spending projects like, well, to use a current example, the pool, now, there was a pool that was built, and, there was a price, and now, I think there was talks about operating too, but, and I don't mean to downplay that, it was ignored completely, but are there any kind of analysis or estimates or anything done in parts of spending that would include cost of maintaining operation and stuff like that as part of, I don't see where it's required in there, but is that part of the process at all or not?
Yes, that is part of the process. In fact, I think, IT is a great example, because before we buy a software package, we often check into what is gonna be the annual requirement for updating that software or for maintaining that software. That same is true in terms of equipment, large purchases and all that kind of stuff. And actually, the pool, there was some O&M factored into the budget.
Right.
There had already been some supplies there, and it was plussed up to look at contracts for maintenance and whatnot.
Is that is that normally automatically part of it, or is that get paid back? Does someone have to ask for it, or does that just normally come as part of it?
So typically what happens, if it's something like a capital project of something that's being built or purchased, you'll see in the initial budget the cost for purchasing or for building that. Then what you would see in fiscal years after that would be the appropriations for the operations and maintenance of that facility.
But so at the time the initial purchase is happening, there's information about an operation cost too?
There's typically information that's provided. That's not factored into the capital cost of that.
Right.
Or, you wouldn't see that necessarily in the same budget year.
Right.
You wouldn't necessarily see the funds to purchase it and the funds to maintain it. Those funds to maintain it would be in later years.
But when they're,
Provided, where would they be provided?
Like, for instance, if the council.
In what method is the administrative cost provided? Is it with the budget? I'm just trying to take notes.
No, not typically. Marcus, I didn't know if we needed, do we need to leave that door open since it's an open meeting?
Yeah, we probably should, Marcus, even though it's loud out there.
is
At
there
least to
another
some
door out
extent.
there you can close, like other door?
They're just moving between the rooms.
Okay, I'm sorry, so, but I understand the operating costs will occur later on, but in terms of when the initial decision is being made, that comes with guidance to what are we really about, like, what are we committing to down the road or not?
It does to some degree, but I mean, we don't have a forecasting magical.
Address it. If you look at 5-07, D4, one of the requirements of any capital program, so for any construction, one of the things that has to be included in there is estimated annual cost of operations and upkeep. So that when you do your capital outlay portion of a budget,
Right.
you would have that annualized cost. Now, separate apart from that, the normal process that you would have in any regular budget appropriations bill, frankly, I don't know how detailed y'all get, and Andre maybe can address this, but generally there is some physical analysis of the impact of any legislative act that is done. I don't suspect it is as detailed at the city level as you, but generally that's part of the discussion. If you make this change, what's the impact? Right? So it'd be two different, depending on what spending instrument that you would be doing, it would be different. If it's in part of the capital plan, the 5-year plan, any one of those projects is already required by charter to have that issue addressed for ongoing expenditure, operating cost maintenance. If it was something that would fall under just the normal budget bill, that would be a discussion of the council to ask about fiscal.
So Chris, are you saying like, for instance, there's the 5-year capital outlay plan.
Right.
So you're saying if we pull up the 5-year capital outlay plan, under this, you think there's some line item or something that would provide some, I mean, I realize things change, if there is no crystal ball, but yet there is a crystal ball.
Well, it's updated every year, and so even with something, so to use your example, the pool, when it would have been initially proposed and included in the mayor's budget or in the part of the capital improvement plan, there would have at that time been their best guess over the next 5 years what it's going to look like, building and then ongoing costs. Each year, as they get more information, and as we are now, a couple of years into that project, I would assume that when you get the mayor's plan or the capital improvement plan, that looking 5 years out, when we wrap up this project, now we're just 5 years of operation, what does it look like?
Right, yeah.
So are you describing what's already in the ordinance, or what it should be?
No, I'm describing what's already in 5-07B4.
That's within 5-07B4. That is not what you're gonna find in the 5-year capital outlay plan. Be straight. So what's there is what's discussed. That is discussed when the plan is brought forward and all that, but there's not a column in that 5-year plan where you're gonna find O&M for each one of those things. I don't know. I'm sure the people who create those documents and put those estimates together for that infrastructure could come up with that. But right now, that is not part of the budget documents, the capital plan itself. That's discussed, but it's not written in a column in that plan.
I'm sorry.
Footnote or anything, because it says shall in here, kind of gives you the impression that it has to be, is it, when you say discuss, do you mean like a verbal discussion, or do you mean that it's like a footnote that says, this is what we think?
There is not a footnote, no.
I don't think there's any guidance. Yeah, I don't think there's anything.
Okay.
I have two questions. One, Lacey, are you in as a member of the public or in your capacity?
I think in my capacity as the
Okay.
administrator.
And then also, it would help me if I could see a budget from last year and the capital outlay plan, the last one, so that we can see it.
It's on the website, you can pull it up.
I was gonna say, it's on the city's website, on the right-hand side, it says adopted budget. It's gonna be way down on the right side.
And then I have another, request for, clarification. It has to do with the timing of the, you were describing that the mayor proposes a budget, in section 5.03. And then there was you were describing the timing of, the communications back and forth between the mayor and the council. Can you Can you go back and repeat that?
I guess my point is that in section 5-03, there could be different interpretations about when these transpire and on what level they do so. Because in section 5-02, it talks about how the budget is prepared, and that's the mayor's proposed budget. And then it transfers to the council that has at least one public hearing, and typically they have 2 public hearings on that budget. And they adopt that, and as that is done, but see, under 5-03, to me, and this may be because of my perspective, this reads as all the things that we should make sure are in the budget, and that in the proposed budget. But it would be very difficult to have number 6 under part 2, because it says such other information as may be requested by the council. Since that is perhaps going to be requested during the process of adoption.
Do you have a suggestion for a change?
Well, that would be, so, the budget isn't.
To me, this is describing the budget before it is, when it is prepared for the initial proposed budget, not the budget document that is under consideration for amendments and ultimate vote. This is just the initial proposed document.
That's kind of what I think it is.
No, I think it is, but it doesn't say that clearly enough, I guess, to your point, it should say the initial proposed, or the proposed operating budget.
Well, no, you're saying that, okay, so I think there's a proposed budget that starts, and then it goes through some work sessions, and then it comes to a first council meeting for introduction, whatever,
Right.
and then it comes to another one to approve.
Right.
No, actually, it comes to the first council meeting for introduction, because according to the charter, it must be introduced at a public meeting.
Is the work session first or after?
No, the work session is after. There's an all-day work session, so by May 15 every year, whatever the council meeting is that follows just prior to May 15, we introduce the budget at that meeting. We hand out all the binders, and it goes on the city's website as the proposed budget. That happens at that meeting. Already, before we got to that point, I have called the council members, and we have confirmed that you can have budget work session on like the first or second Friday of June. Because we know that we've got to have that full day work session with all the department heads and everybody coming in and describing their piece of the budget. So prior to May 15, we introduce it officially. Then early June, there's the first budget work session, and then the last meeting in June is typically when there's another official hearing of it. Any final amendments come forward, and that's typically when the council votes to adopt the budget. If they do not vote to adopt the budget by the end of June, then we have to start July 1 with only 50% of the budget, according to the Budget Act.
So why wouldn't the work session, why wouldn't it be here's draft document, whatever you wanna call it, work session, then introduction? I think that, yeah, the work session though, would give them the opportunity to say, hey, here's questions, and then when it introduced, that would be incorporated, right? It could be.
And I can see how the council could ask for something prior to, the mayor's budget being introduced.
Well, so what
I mean,
yes.
for instance, if the council knows that every year the mayor is gonna have these things in their budget, the council could say, prior to the mayor presenting his budget, when the mayor presents his budget this year, we would like the mayor to itemize for us how he plans to equip the fire department, because we realize that there are things that that need to be updated. So this is prior to, so the council could make that request prior to, so the things that such other information that may be requested by the council is not inconsistent with that, right? Because they could ask him to do that before.
Yeah, they
When
can
he explains his budget, when he presents his budget, so I think that's what that means. I don't think it means such stuff that's maybe requested after. I think this means stuff that the council may be aware of. For instance, if we say we have to do a new, IT system because the one that we have has been breached so many times that it just has no validity to it. We may say that we understand that there are problems, with our IT system. We would like for the mayor to include in his budget, information on how he is going to upgrade our IT system. So this could be something that would happen before his budget is done. or something like that. That's how I see, such other information that needs to be requested by the council. And then after that, he presents the budget, and then the council has, can do their thing as far as questions and stuff like that. But I can see how the council could ask for something prior to the mayor presenting his budget so that they can have a clear understanding of what the mayor proposes to do.
Or they could have sent a resolution, they could adopt a resolution that says with the budget we want X, Y, Z, last year's, receipts or checks, this, that, whatever, I don't know, so that they could have also, right now, they could adopt, when you bring the budget or as part of the budget, we want this list of.
I'm saying that there are things that could happen
Right.
prior to the mayor presenting his budget that where number 6 could in fact come in play.
The way I read it, and what I liken it to is very similar to when the governor presents his executive budget as part of the Constitution. Because you're talking, this is one of those unique areas where the executive branch has a hand in drafting something that has to be adopted legislatively. And so 5-02, 5-03, I see is saying, okay, executive branch, this is what you do before you hand that instrument off to the legislative branch, the council. Once the council takes it and becomes an ordinance that is up for adoption, they can amend it and make something that started out as pink turn into purple. It becomes a legislative instrument at that time, which the council would control. So, to me, maybe I do think it could be clearer to say, to describe it as a proposed budget document that is submitted to the council. This is what should be included compared to the state budget act to make sure that they're consistent, not conflicting. But I don't get a lot of heartburn over item number 6, because to me that's before the legislative process starts. Once they get control of it, the mayor's out of it at that point from the standpoint of being able to change the document. It's their document now.
So you would make no change then to those words?
Not necessarily to item 6. I think Dr. Landon's point is well taken that 5-03 could be clearer to make sure that what is being described there is the proposed operating budget presented by the mayor that he or she is required to submit to the council for them to then take action and to amend or adopt.
The other thing I'll note is that under section 5-03, the last statement, the total of proposed, on part 2, the total proposed expenditures shall not exceed the total estimated revenues. What do you do when you have a surplus in the fund balance, that may have come over from the last fiscal year, and the council wishes to, or the mayor wishes to use those surplus funds and draw those into the budget? That language may need to be updated.
Part 2, any one of those subparagraph items?
It's the very last sentence of part 2 paragraph. The total,
Such other information?
the total of proposed expenditures.
So, you're saying that there's just not addressed in this, ordinance what happens if you do have surplus funds?
Correct. Are you able to use those in your budget to make your budget balanced? Which has been a customary process. Correct.
Which has been used done in the past, is what you're saying. We can have a Hammond rainy day fund.
We do have that. We do have that, just so you know.
There'd almost be no way to get that money out if you couldn't, under like the way it reads,
That's correct.
There would almost be no way to ever
That's
spend
correct.
that money if you took a literal
That's correct. That's my point.
reading of it.
I don't think anybody has ever taken a literal reading of that, if you go look at all the history of budgets, but that is an important thing to know. While we're fixing things.
Alright. Anything else on Article 5? Going once, Andre, anything? Going once, going twice?
Oh, wait.
Lacy was mentioning, the capital improvement program, and that as it's currently written, there's no column specifying part 4 of the 507, so is that something that needs to be, addressed? Because
Well-
it's currently not being formed, so.
Again, I won't say in the history of budgets,
Section 507.
And what's the topic? What's
Capital
not been done?
improvement program.
507.
I will say in the history of budgets, that's not there yet.
No,
Yeah.
it's not a, it's not a lane game, but at least in my mind, it's just, you know, in terms of corrections and things, you know, whether it's to the actual document itself or implementation of it, it's just something that.
Alright, y'all, I'm kinda slow tonight. Can you describe to me what the issue is?
No, she was stating that currently and in the past is not performed the annual cost of operating and maintaining facilities to be
Yeah.
constructed.
Okay.
So, just for, I was just going back to that point because we had gone back to 503. So I just wanted to make sure that was
So we
happening.
had
She
not
was
been
saying,
doing that.
Leslie, she was saying section 5-07,
Part 4,
subsection
People.
B4
before, okay,
is not being included in the budget.
okay,
Fix it.
okay, thank you.
And it's something that should be included.
Right.
It'd be just my luck that the video would not be working, so
Right.
you know, I'd have to go back and.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, just reflecting back on that 507 form, that's what happened to the original pool here in the city years and years and years ago. It got built and there was no money to maintain it in budgets. And that's why it fell into a state of disrepair and ultimately had to shut it down.
Well, it's actually really old.
Yeah.
I think that's the bigger
I
issue.
think it was, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with the pool to speak to that, but I do know that it was, I think it was a foundation, it was not a thing that had to do with age, unless it,
Yeah, I think it was like 40 or 50.
settlement of the earth, like, I don't know if that was, it was like 30 or 40 years old.
Yeah.
maybe?
It was built in the 70s.
Yeah,
But
so,
I remember talking to the mayor, because I lived under all of the mayors that, spoke before him. And that was one of the problems they had is when it got proposed, it got built, there was no money set aside for annual maintenance costs. And I just wonder, same thing could happen with, Chapel Creek, Chapel, sports facility out there.
That will be for those folks to deal with, since they're a separate taxing
Oh,
district.
they are?
Yeah, that's not a big part.
it's not the city's problem.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I missed that.
that's okay, we'll let them deal with it.
So you said there's a rainy day fund. It's not, it's, done by ordinance by the council every year.
It's just a fund item in the budget, it's a fund item that's included in the budget, I think it's kind of required by Louisiana auditors, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's not, actually. The city established it after Katrina and, funded it, over the next few years. You can direct funds to it, but it has to be authorized under emergency ordinance to be used.
There's some formula for it too, isn't there? Or would it, the gold, the amount that's the gold keep in it, like some period of time?
That's a totally different thing.
Sorry.
Okay. I just don't think I wanna get deep in the weeds on that.
You're right. Alright.
Lisa, do you have any, we had earlier considered that there was, concerns about what happens if there's not an item, if there's about line item veto kind of thing, but with no amount that's listed.
What section is that, Lacy?
It's under the mayor, I wanna say it's 3. I think it's under, or it might be under ordinance.
3, 5, no, 3.
Hang on, it might be under ordinance.
It is, it's gonna be
212.
212.
B.
And the idea is that the mayor has the authority to veto amendments to the proposed budget. But how do you veto something that's a zero amount?
Correct. Because basically, there's nothing approved in the budget yet.
Okay, that's right. But that was, again, the theory might be in that the line item veto is to limit spending. If a zero is there, then, I think the line item veto is intended, not in our context, but in context in general, is that it's a anti-spending provision. So, you can stop spending with it, but you can't create spending.
So has there been a need in the past for mayors to be able to, has that caused a problem in the past, I guess is what I'm thinking.
I think,
Yeah, so the example, the
Yeah.
example, and this is an example, not, the dollars are not exact, but for example, the mayor may have proposed $120,000 for a certain item. The council wrapped it back to like 30,000 or 20,000. So the thought was, can he veto, what is there to veto? If he vetoes the appropriation, it's zero.
Right.
And that was the difficulty, as opposed to, is there an opportunity for the mayor to reverse that, to go back to what's proposed? And I don't know,
No.
I don't know what the answer to that question is, that was the problem.
Because then you wouldn't have any approval for that.
Correct.
You would
There's
have never.
nothing, there's nothing to veto,
Right.
they didn't approve the one.
Right.
There is one thing to
Never-
veto, which is the entire budget, which is what has happened at the state level.
Right,
Right.
which is all,
Few
which is,
times.
yeah.
That's the nuclear bomb stuff,
Nuclear,
that others
right.
are wanting to pay
Right.
compliments.
And that's the problem, the mayor
Yeah.
wanted.
Trying to avoid the nuclear option. Got it.
Which is, again, I think the line item is it's to keep from
Oversight.
pork, it's to keep pork from being created. Not to.
again, though, I think there was confusion about that, because there were lots of people who turned to the mayor and said, well, why don't you veto this? And there was no ability to do so.
Just making sure it's not mine.
So I think that people see it as the mayor has a line item veto, but,
Right.
yeah, the interpretation or understanding of that is very different.
At least if it was my car to turn it off.
So, Ms. Hunt, you didn't think that there's any reason to change that? I know, so you're shaking your head, so. I just-
No, because what I was shaking my head about was the, concept that we would go back to the 120, if the council reduced it without council approval.
Yeah, but at that point, you'd have spending that occurs at absolutely zero.
And, one thing we also have to look at in this is there's always the idea of if there's funds available, they can come back and do a supplemental budget, which the charter does call for. If such a thing should happen, and we find that there are significant funds, that the council can come back and, the mayor can come back and submit a supplemental budget. Today, we 30,000. As you can see, we have significant funds that might be in the budget to give them, another additional 45, 50,000, whatever it is that you need. That's in there, but the idea that it would go from 30 to 120 just because he vetoed, line item vetoed that particular section, I think that's inconsistent with.
Well, I guess then I would just say the only other thing is does that line item veto mean it's dead, or does it go back to the council like any other veto of an ordinance, where then you need the supermajority of the council to overturn?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, it goes back, then if the council could come back, so,
Yeah, so it's not like it's just
no.
finished.
No, it's,
Right.
so if there's a line in the budget of spending, that the mayor would wish to veto, he could line item that blanket, it's gone, then it would come back to the council, if they can get a 4-man vote, then they can override it, just like any other veto scheme.
That's your interpretation of how it's operating.
Alright,
approval, you have to, before you get to six, you have kind of form of elected officials.
now we're on approval of we're finished with Article 5. And we're on, approval of the January 25th minutes, which aren't ready, so we're gonna just table those.
Right. Yes.
So moved.
And 28.
I didn't have 28 on there, so I moved them. Okay, so we'll just, move to table the approval of the January 25th, minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Alright, if we have any current or former elected officials, city attorneys, former charter member, committee members who are, unable to attend, they'd like to provide any input at this time, we're welcome to.
I'm fine, thank you.
Alright, moving on, public comment regarding experiences, with interpretation of potential revisions to the city charter. Any other members of the public here to comment at this time? Public comments received by email. Again, Leslie, I had Lacey check the email account today about 4:30, I guess. We have one email from Ralph Ross that came in today. I have a few copies of it here. Actually, Leslie, why don't you just go, since you're kind of looking at it, why don't you go ahead and, I guess, read out the points.
February 8th, Ralph Ross. Comments for tonight's meeting. 1, I regret I can't be in the meeting. I wanted to share my thoughts on the agenda. Minor comments, I might have other minor comments on others, but section 7.09, boards and commissions I feel most strongly about. Somewhere in that section, I believe it bears stating that an additional paragraph of all city board and commission meetings are subject to the state's open meeting law. And therefore, all agendas and minutes would be published on the city's website. As with city council agendas, all exhibits should be linked to the related agenda item. You want to take one at a time, or you want to read them all?
I can just go through them all and then if anybody has anything to say. I mean, he's not here to discuss it.
Additionally, all meeting dates should be published well in advance on a city website event calendar. I understand a new website with the city may be in development, so this would be an ideal time to incorporate such an event calendar and provide procedure to ensure that it is kept up to date. There's an event tab on the website now, but I don't ever recall it being active. Finally, I believe all appointed board or commission members should be electors of the city. Planning and zoning members, for example, should be electors. Consider that, as presently constituted, these members also serve as the city's Board of Adjustment, cites the statute 33:4727. Requires that the Board of Adjustments members shall be landowners and qualified voters. Also, members serving on both the Planning and Zoning and Board of Adjustments likely violates Louisiana's dual office holding law. Again, my thanks to the committee for your service and for receiving my thoughts above. Of course, I'm not expecting or asking for a response, I'm only hopeful it will be worth including in your deliberations.
And we got one more. Let's just go ahead and cover them and then we'll discuss them if anybody wants to have together. There was another email from Cecilia Genoble. Came in, did I hand you a copy of that?
You did.
She wants the city council members to serve 2 4-year terms. The mayor's position should be part-time. The city administrator can assist the mayor. Description of council districts needs to be updated. Columbus Drive is listed instead of University. I did point out to her that the districts have changed since what's in the charter by ordinance as provided for in the charter. That's the whole email. So you have a copy, sir?
I do. It's, Sunday, January 31st, 6:01 PM. We'll attach those to the minutes.
Again, I don't know if this is really a charter issue, but I did, in along, Ralph's comments about the streaming and things, I have heard, I'm trying to remember who, again, I'm drawing a blank on it, but I have heard some comments about asking that the planning and zoning committee meetings be streamed. I don't know if they are or not, so, again, I don't know if that's a charter issue, but.
What'd you say?
That like all the committees, the city committees and board meetings be streamed.
In fact, if you check it on, information, and that's something that we really want to talk about, I think it was, a memo, I looked at it, and I was talking to Andre about it today, regarding the zoning and planning commission, and whether or not, you know, right now it's under state law, we call it state guidelines. But, from my understanding, and you can correct me if I get it wrong, is that if the city council wants to be able to do certain things in reference to that community, it has to be done by charter. I mean, it has to be in the community for the charter. They can't, you know, they have to do that. And some things can be changed from what I understand, and some things cannot. The city doesn't create it, but the city does have the authority to do certain things regarding the city planning and zoning commission. But according to what I'm told by Andre, is that they have to, do it by charter. You have to amend the city charter to make those particular changes. Is that correct?
And I think the planning and zoning committee is gonna be something that we delve into, and some of when we start getting into the points, there seem to have been a lot of comments and things about that committee particularly. Andre, do you wanna kind of address some of the things that can be changed by charter and can be, or?
Well, I mean, I'm not prepared to go into detail, but that's probably addressed in, boards and commissions when you get to Article 7. I think that would be a place to put it. The city's planning and zoning commission is not established in the charter, just by state statute. So what you find is then you're defaulted to state law because it's not in the charter. You can't change powers and duties, but you could change the organizational structure. For example, how are the members appointed? Do they have to be residents of the city? Does the mayor appoint them? Does the council appoint them? How many do you have? Those are the kinds of things I think you could impose that in the charter. You can't, I don't think, impose the duties and responsibilities of those members, because that's what it's.
So in terms of who gets on and
How many people,
how
are they
many,
registered to the city,
who, and
who
how?
appoints them, are they confirmed, etc.
And when we talk about board and commissions, I'm not sure if we want this to be a board or commission and I wasn't here, so I'm talking, really late. But I've gotten a couple of questions, just, not official, about the possibility of setting up some type of, citizens advisory board or commission, for the community, based on, for things like for police issues, police complaints and things of that nature, that the city consider, and I don't know whether it would be a board or commission that would be put under the charter, or whether it would be an advisory council that would be established by the mayor. I'm not sure how best to do it, but there was some concern expressed to me that this type of committee be appointed or be done. And I don't know, like I said, whether we should do it as a advisory under the mayor, with the city council choosing people, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking the mayor choose, city council choose, chamber choose, and NAACP choose a person, something like that. An odd number, of course, But, something like that, and I don't know, like, whether we should look at it again under the boards and commissions that we talked about earlier. And I didn't mention it because I knew that we were getting over here to advisory, in the general provisions, they talk about advisory boards and things of that nature. So that's something you may wanna think about, is whether or not we want something like that established, in the city, and there are examples of it. I mean, you can just get examples of it from everywhere. And I kinda looked at it, and I looked at the cost, and it depends on whether the city, if the city hires a part-time person, to do it, and, what, to sort of, manage that board, or whether they add it to the responsibility, whether that's something the city of Hammond wants, and whether or not it should be, an official board or commission in the charter, or whether it should be an advisory committee appointed by the mayor. Because it's done both ways, depending on, different cities do it different ways.
So you wanted that for the city as a whole, or were you saying particular departments, or?
I'm saying, well, as I told you, when I was back in college, working for Maryland Dairy, we did it for the city as a whole. This was a place that, and if you do it as the city as a whole, then you are looking at expensive expenses, because you're going to have to hire somebody full-time to be there to address these particular issues. But most of them now are being done primarily with, police department situations. And that way, if somebody who's part-time, their job primarily is to schedule the meetings, get information to their various, and sort of like what they do for us now. And, so they would have to go through, and determine, we would have to go through and determine if the city decided they wanted something, then the city, of course, could set out the requirements for the board, or either the commissioner board or the advisory, council under the mayor. And they average, they said, according to, what they pay annually, and this was a previous, study that they looked at, and it does cost cities somewhere between $25,000 and $45,000 a year.
You talking about, this would be a paid position for
They talked about, like, if you got a part-time person, and they looked at, the cost of the paper, they kind of looked at the general administrative and services cost of establishing something, since the people volunteer. I think they looked at what would be the cost of a part-time person, and what would be the cost of the paper, all of the stuff that would be involved in running such a board. And so, they said and in some cities, like Hammond, where it's small, and it may not be that much, it would be less. But in some cities, that would be like, the larger the city is,
Right.
far. So, but that's something that the council, that, if we felt like that was something that Hammond needed to do, we could propose to the council, they could make a decision as to whether or not they felt something like that was necessary. If you do it as an advisory council to the mayor, are we gonna put it in the charter as the mayor decides to set up this board? Now, the reason why it came to me, when we were thinking about it, I was thinking about this ethics board, it never got set up, right? So I was thinking that it would be some type of board similar to that ethics board that would be set up to address those particular concerns of the community. And we could do, I'm sure that the council or Margaret, whoever, could do more information. I could send them the information that I have on it, and, if they want to do something like that. But I didn't know whether I should bring it up as a part of the boards and commission that we've already passed, or whether to hold it as an advisory, board of the mayor.
The question, I have a question about the comment. It says that, you were talking about this, there's a concern that the structure should be established in some method.
Right.
And maybe that a member of the a mayor would appoint some, or a mayor would, suggest maybe the council, the NAACP, and then there was one other,
Chamber?
chamber.
So would this be along the lines of like a human rights commission, or?
It's similar, but, I guess you can call it whatever you like, but primarily what I'm seeing that people are doing is that they are reviewing, complaints that the community has. And it depends on the extent, how extensive that you make that committee. The committee does not have any, legislative power in the sense that the committee cannot fire somebody. The committee cannot hire somebody. All the committee can do is, receive the complaints and then make a report to the mayor or the city council about what their findings are. One of the things that we do have to consider is civil service guidelines and how they may impact something like that, and I have not, researched this at all regarding how civil service guidelines may impact, but I do know that there are state departments that have grievance procedures
Right.
in place who have civil service employees. So, so it's something that, that was brought to me as a citizen mentioned to me about, if we maybe have had something like that previously, maybe we could have avoided, some of the, issues that happened before if we could have had a committee to do an evaluation of the complaint and then have a citizens committee, make a report back to the council and to the mayor, regarding their resolutions and their findings, and have that committee diverse enough that people can trust the committee. There's gotta be diverse enough to be trusted by the community. You can't, you know what I'm saying? It's gotta have enough different people from different diversities, different, the Chamber of Commerce, things like that, that people would feel comfortable, accepting the committee's, ideas. That was brought to me, and so I didn't know, like I said, whether we wanted to put it under Article 7, where we start talking about, general, things, or whether we wanted to put it back over here, where we were talking about boards and commissions.
So, but you're not talking about this committee having any actual power to do anything.
The committee will, no, not power in the sense that they can fire, hire, or anything
They
like
can't
that.
fix the problem.
What they can do is they can do an investigation. People, the folks would be able to come into a hearing or put their information in. They would of course have to like the one that I was working with, they had confidentiality requirements, right? You could not, everything was confidential, so that, because of all of the issues that may be involved. So it would be something that would have to be worked out, regarding those type things. And there are examples of them, everywhere now. You can find them anywhere, but, one of the things that we would have to be concerned with, of course, is the issue of civil service, how the civil service affects it, and what works best for the city of Hammond. Different cities have different, some cities, they do in fact have the power to do certain things, and in other cities, they do not. So, from what I'm thinking with the city of Hammond, I think, you can do an investigation with a recommendation to the council or a report to the council on what they found, then allow the council and the mayor to then move on that report would more fit, the city of Hammond, I would think, based on, our form of government, the number of people that we have, and the issues, and that way it's a part-time.
So are most of the city, I'm just trying to understand, I'm curious, just,
Okay.
in terms of the cities that normally have, is there usually larger cities in general, or are there smaller cities that have?
Generally, there are cities, the ones that I looked at were, I think they were, the smallest I think was maybe like 50 or 75,000, something in that, population, where they had such a thing, but, because of, I don't think it's the size of the city is really, the size of the city should only determine what type of organization you have set up. It should not determine whether or not you have an organization.
So in terms of in Hammond's case, like in bigger cities, I envision this thing as kind of it helps in terms of communication. Like, you got a million people, 100,000 people, or whatever, that other committee can help kind of fill in that communication gap, I think. In terms of Hammond, like the city council itself, I think everybody's pretty accessible. It's relatively diverse. It's two African Americans, 3 whites. It's got the power to investigate, like you brought up the police chief. Like, it's everything from the people, the population, general populace, I think, has been communicated to the council, which has communicated to the administration, it's launched an investigation. And if this committee can't do anything, take any action other than make recommendations and opinions, I mean, that's kind of what the council's done in this case.
Well, in this particular case, no, the difference would be, in this particular case, this would be citizens who are not elected to a particular office. They're appointed, these would be citizens from various, areas of the city. You know, the idea is that it's not a political machine, it's not a political issue. That people are not taking sides because of politics. That's why I said the Chamber of Commerce, that's why I said, you know, people who would be representative of the entire city of Hammond, which would then give the recommendations or the reports a little bit more, I don't wanna say authenticity, because it sounds like I'm saying that.
Credibility.
Credibility might be a good word, right? Than just the political aspects of an elected official. And that's one of the things that, I think is important, especially, you know, in today's society, the things, rest assured that there are still, community members who have issues with some of the things that have happened in the city of Hammond, and are still having issues with some of the things that go on in the city of Hammond. And, I think that something like this would be beneficial, not only to, the citizenry, but also to the officials, and that they can have a board that is diverse, that is representative of all aspects, the business aspects, community aspects, of the city, and that board would then, you know, make a recommendation. I think that that's something that we should think about, and I think that, you know, it was brought to me, and I think that, you know, I'm bringing it to you as a consideration.
So in terms of distinguishing it, you think it could add a perspective that the political process can't?
I think that sometimes people think people go particular ways of politics.
That's good, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this not bringing it, we're all getting citizens bring this thing, and that's our responsibility to bring it up. So I don't let this reflect on the merits of the recommendation. I think the concept is actually really good, maybe something in the city. The one thing I would caution is, again, I said before, is I would encourage us to be careful about what we put into the charter and not end up like we have on our state constitution, where you get a lot of legislation in there. Under the concept that Ms. Knight described, which I think is actually a very good one, under 7-09, either the mayor or the council could do that right now, and probably should, in my opinion. But if we name that entity and put it in the charter, I would hate for us to create something that we're now having to go clean up, like this ethics board thing that got set. Whereas if we let the council do it or the mayor do it, it wouldn't require us to come up 10 years from now and say, we put this there, or recommended y'all put it there, and it served its purpose, or y'all never did anything with it, and now we're having to have another review committee type thing. So I think the concept is good. I would just encourage us to try to, for naming specific boards or commissions, provide the general power and empower the council to take what action and just establishing those boards as they see fit, and just provide the framework about how they would go about doing that.
And there's nothing that stops the council and administrative city, whatever, it's a current apparatus from creating that board or from which any other advisory board.
They could do that now and could provide for payment to those members. The mayor can do it on a voluntary basis, like it's not described, where there is no pay. And I would suspect if the council can create something that can receive pay, that they would have the ability to create something that is voluntary, because they created us.
Right.
I mean, right, so I mean, I think they have that ability right now in 709, and maybe something certainly need to include it as part of what the council sees, is that maybe something they take action on without having to go to a vote of the people that create it.
Yeah, and there's another aspect of it, and I think it's a great idea, by the way. Our market area that converges on Hammond every day is about 160,000 people. So you have people that live outside the area that can bring their problems into the city. And perhaps, the sheriff or, the parish council should look at something maybe in unison, to help fund
somebody in that agency agree?
Yeah, cause I think, how many people have had it last census?
24,000.
20,019, according to the 2010 census. Oh, wait, no, I
It's
didn't.
more than that, we're gonna be 25,000.
Yeah. So it's still a small town.
Andre, the planning and zoning committee, you'd say had to be changed by charter, huh? Are there other, maybe, if we don't, I don't know if you know it, I know I'm blindsiding here, but maybe if you can give us a list of any boards and commissions and things that if we do anything with has to be in the charter?
I think we all have to be in charge.
Well,
I mean, if you're trying to
what I
override
mean
state
is like,
law.
this committee, this board that was just brought up, or I don't know, I guess it's more a committee than a board, but, I don't think it needs to be in the charter for it to be created, but the planning and zoning would have to be in the charter too.
To override state law.
Right, so are there any, just, maybe if we know which ones if we're gonna do anything with, it's gotta be done in the charter, so that way if it doesn't have to be in the charter, if we decide, like Chris suggests, that we leave it alone, we just leave it alone.
I think it's, I don't think it's limited, I think any committee, you can go through the list of boards and commissions. I guess I want to be more specific and just over, the charter review committee, housing committee, I mean, those things you need to probably, if you want to formalize that, put in the charter. I would tell you, planning and zoning, historic district, recreation, I'm trying to think of what I have
Civil
boards.
Service Board.
Yeah, civil service board.
Civil Service Board actually receives compensation according to state law.
Right, civil service board, probably I would tell you the big button things that you wanna look at. The others, as was pointed out, you may just wanna put an allowance in the charter that the city council may adopt, that may appoint advisory boards to help its discharge its responsibilities. And that way, the council can then decide, I want an advisory group on housing, we did that recently. I don't think you're prohibited from doing it, but you could put that affirmative authority in the charter.
So is it in there now or not?
It's not, but
It's
that's.
not in there, I thought I heard.
It's not, but it's,
There's not a specific named one. In 7-09, there's authorization. 7-09 has the mayor can appoint, and then there's a sentence saying, shall not apply to a board or commission created by ordinance, which the council has the
Yes.
authority to do.
But there's not a specific provision that says that the city council can.
correct.
Is the civil service board, the composition of it set by the charter too?
State law,
So the charter doesn't have anything to do with it, so it's really nothing.
it's all state law.
Okay.
And then the question is, can you, change the composition of the civil service board by charter?
But-
We can look at that.
That's what I said, okay. Do you understand, can you help me with my question, I don't know.
I think what Frank is asking, there are certain entities that are created by the state through statute.
Yes,
That if the city council desired to have any change, as you described, on planning and zoning makeup in there, that would need to be done in the charter to allow that authority. I think Frank's question is, are there any other entities like that created by state law, civil service board, planning and zoning, et cetera, that are already established and the processes are there, but that the city council would have the authority to change either the number of people on it, how they're appointed, how they serve, et cetera, other than planning and zoning? Are there others that we would have to specify in the chart? I think Frank's asking for a list of those.
Yeah, Civil
Yes.
Service Board, the Housing Authority,
Yeah,
the Planning and Zoning. The only one really that's a local board that's created locally and orchestrated locally is the Historic District Commission.
So the historic district is not one of those?
Well, they have state laws they also have to operate under, but they had an ordinance that creates it by the city.
Okay, so that one can, Andre, that one can be, historic district can be altered, doesn't need charter amendment, it can be altered by ordinance.
right.
I think as long as it's not in conflict with state law, that's what we're getting at.
Yeah, I mean, that's the.
Because that's what we're getting at overall with the charter,
Right.
is that are you gonna be, you don't wanna be in conflict with state law.
Right.
I think that, what we looked at in planning and zoning is the charter put membership, how many members, how are they appointed. You can't change powers
Correct.
and duties, but you could change composition and membership.
And is
That's what
that-
you're asking about.
And is, yes, is that for planning and zoning, civil service, historic district, and housing authority, or not?
I don't know. I'll let
Okay,
you know.
okay.
Okay.
And then also another one might be DDD, sort of established by statute as well.
So they have their own separate taxing entity that's established by state law.
Okay.
The same is also true of like Heidi, the Hammond Economic Development Board. They're also established by state law, so again,
May I ask just a general question? Andre, rather than, specifying each one of these boards that exist now, would it be possible, for instance, similar to 7-09, or maybe under both the mayor's section and the council section, to provide authority, a general overarching authority that says the mayor, or the city council by ordinance, may establish the number and qualifications for any board or commission operating within the city of Hammond, under this charter, unless prohibited by state law, where we just gave the general power, so that if, you know, some of these, the council may say, I wanna change how many people are on planning and zoning, but I don't wanna change this other one. If we provided that just authority and said how the process would be done generally, so that the council has flexibility, and you would never have to amend the charter again. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Providing the general power and the framework, and let the council have the authority on, do it by ordinance.
The only person that's gonna be, generally, doing this kind of stuff is, you know how they do it at the court, if you get to the court, the specific is gonna overrule the general. So the question is gonna be, since they have a specific state ordinance, is it gonna overrule a general charter provision, not to say that, you understand what I'm saying, they have a specific ordinance, is it gonna overrule what might be a general, ordinance provision? So that's the only thing when you're looking at that, to determine whether or not that would make a difference, because there's a general ordinance versus a specific statute. And so that's something that if we, and so that way, that when it's looked at, it's realized that if it does include this, it does include that, and it's specific, especially the ones that we know.
Correct, that
where the
exist today.
issue might come in.
Yeah, I think that's a good
So that we
recommendation.
won't run into that problem.
Yeah.
I've run into that problem.
I think that's a good recommendation.
All right. We're still under emails, is that where we're at?
Whew, we jumped all over the place that time.
Yeah, I have. I think that was still under the email section. Anything else on the email?
So Mr. Ralph mentioned, about the Board of Adjustment and the planning and zoning. So currently, that's the same persons. The members of the planning and zoning are also members of the Board of Adjustment. And he's stating that it may be in violation of Louisiana Dual Office holding law. So is that something that you wanna?
Yeah, I can address that. That's something you may want to put in the charter. So there is a dual office holding issue if you've got separate board of adjustments and separate planning and zoning. What Covington did to remedy that was they went to the legislature and had a specific statute passed that allowed its members of the board of adjustments to be on planning and zoning. What Hammond did was the council got rid of a board of adjustment, so there's no technical board of adjustments in the city of Hammond. What the council did was assign the duties and responsibilities to the planning and zoning commission. So those functions of the board of adjustments are done by planning and zoning. You could address that in the charter, but I don't know, Trace, I need to look and see. Covington again is special legislation, but Ralph, technically in the city of Hammond, there's no board of adjustment.
Is the Board of Adjustment required by state
It says if you have board of adjustment,
if you have?
that's their responsibility. So they do have a designation of duties given to planning and zoning. And the council just said, planning and zoning, you shall serve these additional duties. And they did that by amending the UDC.
So you saying that the council amended it?
It's not in an ordinance.
Okay,
So the UDC was passed by ordinance. So to change that ordinance, the council had to amend the UDC.
okay.
Andre, is there, misremembered, isn't there a provision that actually kind of authorizes that in statute? Like, if you don't have something that does this, then you have a board of adjustments or something?
There is some language that allows the council to assign duties and
Right.
responsibilities of those things.
Okay, so we're not in conflict with the state statute, we're
Correct.
operating under.
If you wanted to have a separate board of adjustments,
Then we would have the
a
problem.
separate membership, you couldn't have the same people. That's how you would get out.
That was a clever remedy, prevent dual office holding, get rid of one of the offices, and
Well,
make one group do everything.
I'm not sure I get credit for that. I don't think we're the only place that's done that.
That's pretty clever.
Anything else on the notes? All right. Moving on to Article 6, which is
Referendums and recall. Has this ever been used, Andre?
Yes. Yeah, it was the video bingo.
Oh, yeah, that was referendum.
Which caused a problem, which I want to address.
Okay.
So in 601 subsection 6. So 601 subsection 6. And this is a citizen initiated referendum.
Right.
It spells out a specific process for that. And the conflict is 6016 prescribes a deadline when a vote has to happen. And that conflicts with the state election code. So in your Attorney General's opinions, 080075, I addressed that conflict with the Attorney General and asked for advice on how to resolve that. And there, which sort of expected was, you gotta go by state law. Even though it's in the charter, which was my problem, it's in the charter. So that's an example of the charter doesn't necessarily always override state law. So I think, and I can help with some recommended language, to basically, instead of giving a 60-day deadline for your election,
Next available election.
default under the state election code, yes. That's kind of a simple fix, but I think it's a fix that we ought to address.
And Andre, if I recall correctly, there's more than one place, where that issue comes up in terms of the election being called. I was wanting to say that, I thought I read two separate places where the election, because there's one provision for, a citizen-initiated ordinance, and there is a separate provision for a citizen-initiated charter change. So, and I think, yeah, 7-04.
7?
Right.
Okay, we do the same thing, you're right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's in two separate places, yeah.
This is 601.
Yeah, I jumped over to 7, so there's one for changing the charter that's led
Right.
by, citizens initiative.
702.
But it doesn't specify the 60 days.
Right.
It has the more general language on the date certified by the, called by the council, or one that's already scheduled.
Yeah.
That's probably better language.
Yeah, and so I'll recommend to the group a revision on 6016 to that general language of the state law.
Maybe look at 7-04.
Yeah.
Language to be consistent. One question I had, and I would just note, Andre in subsection 8 of that same section, just a question. It specifies that if you have a citizen-initiated ordinance, it passes by a majority vote of the electorate, that ordinance cannot be amended during that term of that council during which it was passed.
Right.
It talks about if there are conflicting items at the same time. In my mind, my thought was, if I can't amend that statute, can I pass a separate ordinance that has the effect of amendment? Section 8 doesn't address that. I mean, it just says you can't amend that one. It doesn't say you can't pass another ordinance.
In conflict with it. Right, I agree. I mean, that could be something to add, not just amend it or repeal it,
Right.
but adopt an ordinance in conflict with that one.
Right.
But that's, I mean, if I were looking at this, I would say if you passed another ordinance, which in any way change that ordinance, that you were technically either amending it, even though you didn't name that specific ordinance, or repealing it by effect, if not by specific language. So, I think it's gonna look at, I think it would be clearer to put that in there, but I would think that if it came down to it, it would probably be an issue of, did it in effect amend or repeal that ordinance, whether or not it was the same ordinance.
Correct.
So I think that, to put it in there to be clear would be
Thank you.
better, so that
As a guy that sometimes has to review these things and give opinions, I think you're right. You could say another ordinance that conflicts with it is an amendment to that ordinance. I think it's clear to say yes.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm thinking about all the little
Yes.
tricks. There are lots of things you
Yeah,
can do.
don't
You can say
think,
I'm
I don't
amending
know.
it, but I'm doing an ordinance that prohibits when that entity can meet.
I'm working
on
It's
the
only between
definition.
1 AM and 2 AM. And you basically make it where, you're like, I didn't amend it, I just said what their meeting
I work
times
for the
were.
Department of Insurance.
Oh, yeah,
Do
I
I need to take
You
this?
know all the tricks. I think the intent is there, the spirit of it is,
Yeah,
if the electorate passes this, don't monkey with it in any way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I guess, Chris, how long you're thinking, like you recall, like the state statute is the first of the state, does that even need to be there?
There's an existing statute on it.
Well, and not only, yeah, not only is it existing, but this says follow the state's.
Well, and, similar to one of Mr. Ralph's comments in here about that boards and commissions should be subject to open meetings law. I think they are already, and I think the state statute already requires that. Same as us.
Chris, I have this thing brought up, I brought this up to I'm on the DDD,
Right.
and, I was asking about some kind of way of getting some kind of email address, because we're all using our personal email account. Well,
Which opens up your email.
you open up your email, but also there's a record keeping problem.
Right.
Because like I use my firm email, which we have a record keeping process, so it's not an ordeal, but if average Joe citizen is using their Gmail account and they forget their password, where does it go then? So, and I've gotten some pushback on that actually, but I think it's a problem for, again, off the charter here, but I think it's a problem for all these boards and commissions. Maybe they should have email accounts that are given how much we rely on email and everything else, that if you're on a board or commission, you use this email address for that business, or not business, for the business of that board or commission, so that it falls under the, the record retention problem.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And also prevents you as a lawyer getting that public record
Yes,
request.
indeed, because I'm
If
telling you,
you
you
have
don't
attorney
want to do that.
privilege. Yeah.
You do not want to do that. I'm here to tell you, you don't want to do that.
Where would that go?
On the boards and commissions.
Thank you. I'm gonna have a hard time tonight, I think.
Article 6. Moving on to Article 7.
There's a lot of stuff in here. This is one where there's already a suggestion both by Andre and the mayor, Dr. Landry, Dr. Landry, to update provisions here. One, language that references facts but does not address digital signatures. We have the code of ethics issue that Andre brought up at our first meeting, second meeting.
And whether 702 should be followed, whether that conflict of interest should also be, you know, following what the 42 or whatever it is in the, the state code of ethics. So, whether, you know, whether we should, under 702, we should just adopt the state code of ethics regarding these things.
And Chris, it was repealing 703 completely because of the state, or what was the comment on that?
Well, the last,
Last sentence.
last sentence, or last two sentences, the code shall be administered, at the very least, the elimination of that, although it's questionable whether or not you need the first part of that, which is, flowery language, one talks about in the first 6 months adopts ethics provisions, but you're already subject to that.
Right.
If anything, what I would say is a reference to say that, all individuals employed by the city of Hammond, are as required by state law, are subject to the code of ethics, shall abide by the state code of ethics provisions therein, something like that, but I don't know what to do that.
Would there be any, any city employee, city appointee or whatever that would not be governed under the exceptions to the code of ethics? I know there are certain exceptions to the code of ethics, but not as it relates to, city, you know, or governmental employees. I'm trying to think of
There's
that.
a few that are created by statute that generally dealt with, the nepotism provisions. But those are generally spelled out for specific circumstances where you've got somebody who had already been employed as a doctor at a hospital when their father-in-law became CEO, and so they didn't want the doctor to lose their job. Anyway, there's certain those, but outside of that, I can't think of a scenario where somebody
I couldn't
paid
think
by
of
the
a
city.
situation where the city would have, something that would be an exception to the code of ethics, the city of Hammond or any municipality can. I'm just trying to think, I'm going through it, I can't think of anything.
I can't,
So it would seem like if you said that, you know, as Chris indicated, that everybody was subject to the code of governmental ethics, which they are, whether they know they are or not.
They do, they take annual training.
You know, they, you know, that would be something that, you know, to clean this up. I mean, you could still leave the flowery language of how, you know, you said, maybe you might wanna leave that. You may look at 702 to see, because the state, provisions have some specific guidelines for what happens when you violate the code of ethics, as well. So you have to compare and contrast those, or just say the state guidelines, and that way it's uniform. They won't have to look at city guidelines and state guidelines, since everybody's subject to the state guidelines.
Similarly, the conflict of interest provision, which there are already statutes on that, the only difference here is that this charter prescribes a remedy that says you lose your office immediately.
And the contract's void.
And they've already determined guilt. You are guilty of malfeasance without a trial. That's pretty, that's strong.
Chris, can you go back and repeat the two items that you mentioned right at the beginning when we discussed Article 8? I just want to get them down for a minute.
So,
I thought you had a mark.
7-10 prescribes facsimile signatures, but does not provide language that is current with technology with digital signatures. So it's just an updating of that. 7-03 deals with code of ethics and a board of ethics that Andre suggested we remove.
Yeah, okay. Are you asking for more peanut gallery comments?
Do y'all, I have a question. Does the city require a bond for its,
Certain employees, so it depends on which employees.
Okay.
Section 7-08, personnel administration. Part A,
7-08 Part A.
prior to being effective, any proposed system of personnel administration shall be submitted by the mayor to the council for approval and adoption in an administrative code. Can anybody tell me what that means?
It generally means that it's almost like human resources.
I can tell you what the city attorney is giving you opinion on. I think it's the policy and procedures manual.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it is, like a human resource.
That's the way we
Okay.
That's the way you interpret it, does it need to be cleaned up?
could. I mean, instead of using the word administrative code, it could be a policy and procedures manual or something to that effect.
And that's the citywide one, not
Yes.
the departmental
Correct.
procedures.
That's the city one.
Yeah,
Correct.
because again, I'll just caution everybody in getting too deep in the weeds.
Yeah, right, for the general power, and then under that same section, paragraph B is moved at this point.
Not
Right.
what that would be.
That's carryover, any
Right.
employee holding the city position.
Grandfather, right?
Right.
Is there anybody that was, I mean, they're there now anyway, I mean, I think it's done, it's kind of an unnecessary provision, huh?
Well, that's what I wondered if part A was about also, was setting up the initial stuff of the city,
And not
once the
each
charter
term.
was instituted.
Yeah.
Because that's my other question, is how much does in the nitty gritty details, how detailed does everybody wish to be in enacting policy and procedures?
The only value I see in paragraph B under that would be if the charter was amended and impaired someone who is already employed, but I think it'd be made more general, to say at the time this charter takes full effect or any amendment thereto. So that you don't have an election to basically remove somebody from their employed position.
I know it previously came up, I think Andre had brought to our attention about the responsibility of the persons who can remove the city clerk council, so I'm seeing in part C. So the clerk of the council is not a classified
Correct.
personnel
Correct.
position? Okay. So our only civil service employees are police and fire?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then all other employees are classified, is that?
No, they're not really classified. They're just a general employee, not governed by civil service law.
Okay,
It's really police and fire
Are the only civil
are
service
classified as civil service. So there's really no classified, there's no quote classified personnel in the city. That may be some of the confusion that's in there.
yeah.
There's no classified type, like you have in state civil service, like there's nothing like that in the city of Hammond for general employees.
What time were you having dinner brought in, Mr. Chairman? I just wondered.
Well, I was looking at, I was like, well, we're almost done with 7, and I was looking at 8, and I was like, we only have one more. So, no, I thought we were gonna wrap up by 7, but we're,
Let's wrap up and go back to 7.
alright. Well, does anybody have anything else on 7, or should we call 7 done?
Let's think of it.
Anything else on 7?
Well, just to point out, earlier, to Ms. Knighton's point as well. I mean, I think 7-09 is something we would look at, just to make sure that general policy, and there may be a wish to put something specific, but I think 7-09 is something that we will.
And if we do, you know, we can do it as a may as opposed to a shall. And that would at least have that committee as a part of the charter, but might be specifically required to be staffed if such a committee is not, necessary for the city. But it was brought to me, and I, based on, you know, I guess, looking at the news and seeing what's going on around the country, such a thing is something that would be, good for the city.
I appreciate you bringing that up. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it was necessary, I think it's probably already done, but do you need a motion for us to attach these emails we received to the minutes, or?
Let's go ahead and do it. Yeah,
I move we attach
yeah.
the 2 emails that we received public comment to, make them a part of the minutes.
I'll say.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So at this point, I think we're done with Article 7. Article A, do we wanna, we're at 7. And this is really just,
Oh, I'm sorry, I remember in, I think Mr. Ross had, in section 711, reconstitution of the government. Didn't he suggest that, that there's one, maybe it's the mayor, that if the mayor can't act, then that we need another level of, emergency power if someone can't act? Oh, no, or,
he
we
had,
already
he did
addressed
say
that.
something to that, but I think it
We
falls
already
through.
addressed that in about disability probably.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
okay.
did, and I think it also, I think there is a,
I think it's already
Yeah, I
addressed
think
in the section, the mayor's section.
Yeah, I think you're right.
falls to Lacey, actually. Doesn't it?
Right, in section 3, in the article 3. I believe.
goes to the council.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alright.
3-05.
Article, moving on from Article 7, okay, Article 8, I don't know, if we're gonna get into any discussion of any length, I guess this is, table it. I mean, it is council district, which I think we've kind of talked about already, several times.
I move that we table section 8.
Okay. Is that your motion?
That's one motion.
Anybody
I'll
second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, when do you want to set our next meeting?
Oh, while you're looking at dates, Mr. Chairman, can I give an
Yes,
update?
yes, please.
As I mentioned to you last time, I spoke with Council for Better Louisiana. They don't do advisory work with groups like ours. I subsequently talked to Mr. Robert Travis Scott, who's the executive director of PAR. PAR used to do a good bit of work in this area, advising groups like ours. In fact, worked with the group that developed the first charter that Mr. Steele mentioned personally. Mr. Scott told me that PAR has not done that in some time, and it's not a scope of the work that they presently do. He asked what areas specifically were we looking at. I told him that the primary issue that had come up had to do with compensation of council members and the mayor, and that we were looking for some guidance on comparability with other similarly sized cities. He told me that outside of the municipal association, which I've still tried to contact John Gallagher, the executive director of the municipal association, and I've not talked with him yet. But Mr. Scott's suggestion was, he said, you have such a resource right there in Hammond at Southeastern University, it may be that you could contract with one of the faculty members there to do the work in pulling the data and to provide a report to you, if it's limited only to that issue. As I was discussing with the chairman prior to the meeting starting, if we went beyond that to receive advice on issues of term limits or council members at large or other issues that come up, we probably would need to go outside of that, and really the only entity left that's been brought to my attention would be the municipal association. I'm still asking if there are others that might be, good, that do some type of that policy work. But I have not had any of those recommended to me at this time.
And I'll reach out to somebody at something, unless you got, anybody want to reach out to in particular?
I would reach out, first just to Dr. Crane, and ask Dr. Crane, is there someone in particular that, within the faculty staff, or I could ask Dane Sherman, who's, chair of the faculty senate, whether, there are any particular faculty members that would have that skill set, and they probably have multiple ones. The only person outside of that I thought, if there's no one at Southeastern, the gentleman that was the head of the legislative fiscal office for years, Patrick Goldsmith, was recently retired, and is doing nothing. I say nothing, I'm sure he's doing something, but he has that skill set and the contacts from all of his years working as, head of the legislative fiscal office. He may be someone outside of that, but personally dealing with something here in the city of Hammond, we have Southeastern here. I think that was a great recommendation to maybe check with him and see if there's someone qualified there first.
You could also reach out to Bill Joubert over there at
Yeah. SBDC.
And I don't know, there was a group that the school board looked at, and I'm not sure what, I don't know if it was just for, but you remember the group that they had that gave them a report recently on attendance zones and drew some lines and stuff for them to consider? They did a whole thing, and I don't know if they do this type of work or not, but I can't remember the name of the group, but I can check to find out who that group was and whether or not they do this type of work. I can't remember, I just remember they were talking about this group who did that kind of stuff that they made a report to the court. So, I can ask and find out from, Superintendent Stilley who it was and whether or not they do this type of work.
Sure.
And as a follow-up, I know, did you ever find out, get a copy of that judgment? Did he ever send you a copy of it?
No, I'll ask again.
I followed up as well, but I didn't get it.
Well, if you didn't get it.
I'd also like to see
Oh,
us
that's not true.
maybe partner with Southeastern, that they have a vested interest in our town. I mean, they live here. And,
Feed the family.
yeah, that's a huge resource.
I also think it sends the right message too when the city utilizes them as a resource. We're asking businesses to hire people from them. It'd be a nice thing for an organization to show the level of trust we have in their abilities. So I like that idea of going Southeastern, whoever that person may be.
Sounds good.
Or are you gonna talk to Dr. Crane?
I'll talk to Dr. Frank.
February 22nd, sound for a meeting.
Looks good to me.
I think we'll get back into council chambers.
I would recommend that. You don't have the same technological capacity over here, and you heard the
Noise.
background noise.
That work for everybody?
Yes.
All right.
February 22nd.
All in favor? Any opposed? 5:30?
Yes, sir.
Here?
No, city council chamber. Anybody want to move to